Good morning, everyone. It's about 5 minutes to noon, so I can still say good morning. Uh, Thank you, Mr. Batra and team of Business World for having me here. Always a pleasure to be part of the BW Summit. Uh, uh, Professor Sitaram, Professor Shasibuddhe, and Professor Niranjana, it's an honor and privilege to share this dais with you all. In comparison, I'm very, very pale, and what I'm going to talk about is nowhere going to be close to the kind of content that you all gave when you spoke. So advance apologies if I start talking about areas which are really your domain and fiefdom. I've been asked to talk about K-12 and beyond. Honestly, I'd like to break it up into two parts, K-12 and beyond. I'm not going to talk about the beyond. I'm going to try and focus on K-12. And the caveat which I want to give everyone is that whatever I'm going to talk about now is really going to be I'm just going to try and break it up into three parts. One is what we were in K-12 education, what we are today, and what, in my eyes, we should be as we go forward. So a lot of things that I'm going to be saying, I think is going to be known to some or all of you. So if you hear words, familiar words which keep coming out, sorry about that, but I think we are all going to be aligned to what really has been happening around in the system. If you really look at the Indian education landscape, I think it's pretty simple. The data is overwhelming. 1.5 million schools, nearly 1.2 million of them are government, nearly about 1.5 million preschools, of which nearly 1.4 million are Anganwadis and Balwadis, 300 million children going to school who are under 16 years of age. 300 million, that's nearly 25% of our population. One-fourth of our country is actually learning today. And I think that's a very, very overwhelming number. Nearly about 52 boards exist in this country. And if you really look at the way we have transgressed the history of what we have really done in education over the years, you will all know that, really this whole education started way back in 1500 BC with Vedic education. Then we moved into some very, very brilliant ancient universities like Nalanda and Taxila. And then we went into learning and getting exposed to Arabic education. We went on to then have the colonials coming in, and therefore the school system started. And finally, we got independent. And that's how I think we are where we are today. And in this journey, there are many names that one should not forget. One should not forget Aryabhatta, Mahatma Phule, Dr. Radhakrishnan, Dr. Abdul Kalam. And of course, there is also one Brit called Lord Thomas Macaulay. Let's give it to him also for whatever he's done for the education space. But after we became independent, I think a lot of things started changing for the country. If you really look at the three education policies that came out in this country over the last many, many years, the first one was basis the Kothari Commission that came out in 1968. And the Kothari Commission, the key highlight line or the tagline was they want to try and change the destiny of India from the classrooms. Shaping the destiny of India from the classrooms is a very powerful line in 1968. And I think that is where they also started making a real impact in the social, political, and economic strata of India. And I think we must owe it to the 1968 Kothari Commission to kicking it off. 1992 was the next big, there were a lot of draft policies, of course, but 1992 was the next big policy. A big transformation happened in the Indian ecosystem, the education ecosystem with 1992. The National Literacy Mission came to being. The Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan started following. Most of the schools started coming up after that. And of course, the whole concept of universal enrollments, trying to have as many people getting educated, happened with the 1992 policy. And then, of course, after about 3 decades came the very, very well-known 2020 NEP, which coincided with COVID. And I don't want to get into that, but all of you are aware of the 5+3+3+4 system, the credits, the entry, exit, vernacular language, etc. But this is how I think we have really been really traversed in the journey of education so far. And then we had a further small break between pre-COVID and post-COVID. There was this pre-COVID part of education where, all conversations were around rote learning and how rote learning can now move into experiential learning. The likes of Ken Robinson had started getting discussed where, he brought in this whole concept that we are no longer in an industrial age and therefore we can't be teaching children in packs in a classroom, and it should now start getting centered around the child themselves, personalized learning as we call it. And that's how we started seeing competition, and most of the schools coming out with taglines like we have got a 1:10 ratio, we have a 1:30 ratio, 1:40 ratio. If you're a 1:60 ratio, you're a bad school. That's the way it was being positioned. Creativity in the classroom was something that that came up quite often as a subject matter discussion. We talked about how a child who's most creative when they're young starts losing the creativity as they grow older and start growing in life. The role of teachers, multiple intelligence in children, these are all topics that got discussed. And of course, there was a sense that digitization is coming in and we should start getting digital inside classrooms, but it did not really take off the way it should till COVID struck. What was more important those days was to tell the parents that if you let your child come into my school, out will come Einstein. That is the way the advertisements used to keep coming out in the markets. And then, of course, we also had a lot of problems in the B.Ed space. A lot of B.Ed schools and colleges had to get shut down. And I remember a former Union Secretary of Education, and I'm not going to name him, and I know everybody will know who he is, who kept saying that, look, there is a problem. Education is really like a mafia. That is the kind of statements that was made earlier, and we had to slowly come out of that. And that's when COVID struck, and then we started having this whole period of COVID. What happened in COVID? All of you are aware of it. I hate to remind you, but the few lines that we kept hearing was that, one, school buildings have shut, but not schooling. And that is a big, powerful line. We started saying that don't think that schools have shut or schooling has shut. And that's how the online platform started coming into being. We had a lot of virtual platforms. EdTech started getting its prominence during that period. And the whole teacher adaptability was tested. And my God, the teachers really got themselves adapted to a new way of teaching. And that is something which was exemplifying. Students started getting adaptive to online teaching, and I must say that even the students' creativity in trying to bunk class also took a different turn. There used to be students who used to be on the screen and they'll just freeze to try and show that the screen is frozen. But the student forgot that the fan was running. So those things also started happening, and that's how the whole COVID period started going, and it was fun. But I think a few things happened. The pressure started mounting on the owners, the pressure started mounting on the teachers, the parents, fee structures, allied services. There were a lot of pressure that started mounting on all these areas. And I think the biggest, in my eyes at least, the big hit that happened was the lack of social, emotional skills, especially for the small children. Children who were 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, they just couldn't go out and do what they should be doing, go to preschools and kindergarten schools. And that was a big cost, I think, that we paid during that period. But anyway, I think we went through that. I think we managed to really do a lot of work in that space, and we started coming out of it. Now, post-COVID, the tech industry started to bounce back in a big way, and suddenly there were talks about how technology could be, could technology really replace a teacher? And it was very clear that technology cannot replace a teacher. Technology is a means to the end, and it is a tool that the teaching and the academic diaspora can use to get their end objective. So technology cannot replace teachers, but it has also started to be very clear that teachers who do not adapt to technology may get replaced by teachers, who adapt to technology. So that has definitely started becoming a very, very important line. And then this whole word called hybrid, phygital, Mr. Batra said that hybrid is not a good word for education, but unfortunately it is happening that way. I mean, I've been part of some courses where I've done entire course online, and I had to go to the physical structure 4 times in the year, 3 times in a year, and that really makes it phygital and hybrid, and you cannot really avoid that. So I think hybrid is here to stay in some form, but technology has really entered ERP, they've entered content, they've entered into the curriculum, they've entered into all areas, assessment, etc. And I think another area which is starting to look different now is the professionals are starting to step in. We're suddenly starting to see a lot of big firms coming in. India started becoming a big destination now for patient capital to try and invest into education. Business deal seems to be getting done. Corporatization of education has started to happen. Now, is that good? Is that bad? Is it debatable? I guess it is debatable. So you could have in some places a single school doing everything that they need to do for that school, and you have a chain of schools that is starting to get formed with global brands backing it. So this is what's been really happening, and I think, again, some of these areas could be debated upon, but as we get into all this, where do we stand today? And this is what I feel, this is my personal opinion. Professor Sasipathy talked about the VUCA world. I've also actually thought about that. We are entering into a very, I love the way he described it, but the fact is, VUCA is supposedly, as per the original theorists, it is supposed to be a very volatile, uncertain, complex, and an ambiguous world. Although I must say, I hope someone rephrases that basis what you have said, sir. I think what you have said is far better. But the fact is we are entering into this world. We are progressing, the country is progressing at a very, very fast pace, at a pace that is much, much beyond what we can imagine. And I think now you can notice that even generation gaps are getting smaller. Earlier, the generation gaps used to be nearly 10 years. Today, a brother who is about 2-3 years younger than his older brother is already in a different generation. That's a that's a speed at which we're going. So, but while that is coming smaller, the gap between the urban and the rural student base is starting to get wider. I think the digital divide is starting to get wider, and unfortunately or fortunately, the people in the rural space are also able to access and get exposed to this wide world through social media, which an urban child is able to access. And if we don't try and give them the same opportunities and bring them together, we have a situation which I think we need to be aware of. So I think, and the other areas, the whole, the jobs, they seem to be going redundant. We seem to be having a lot of changes happening in the upskilling and reskilling space. A child today is able to get comfortable with the digital world when he's 3 years or she's 3 years, I guess even 1 year. At the same time, I think we're also going through a space where there is cyberbullying, where there is a lot of virtual friends which is happening. Digital, as we call it, the whole digital relevance is starting to get reflected in your TikTok and Instagram and YouTube videos, because you just have to do it to show the world that you're doing something, right? And is this good, is this bad? Debatable, but this is happening today and we can't avoid it. But it also has its cost. Mental well-being is kind of getting compromised. A lot of children are starting to get mentally very, very stressed out. Deep fake is on the rise. Down 5 years, when I talk like this, you won't even know if it's me or one fake of mine. That's how it's going to be. And I think the violence, impatience, resilience are all starting to, the violence is going up, impatience is going up, resilience is going down. And in my eyes, the burnout is likely to be far, far faster. And I think it will be about 15-20 years ahead of what burnout has been happening in our yesteryears. The student in a classroom does not take notes anymore. Look at me like an idiot writing all these notes. Students today don't even do that. They've got Fireflies, they've got Joplin, they've got OneNote. They just put it and they just sit down and they just wait for it to capture. And after that, they just refer to it and they do whatever they have to do. So, in this scenario, the question is, should we have schools? I'm just going to leave that to y'all. Should we have schools? Should we have schools in the current form? Should schools really be a hub of knowledge? Should we, because knowledge is now available everywhere. So should schools be the place where you need to come to learn knowledge? Or should schools be a place where the focus is more on personality development? Should the focus in schools be more on physical development? Should the focus in schools be more to know oneself, to know the other, to know how to work in an environment of social etiquettes, to know how to convince, to know how to be convinced, to know how to argue, to know how to get the data and be able to put it across? Should that be what the school should be doing? Should the school should be there to take care of the tiny tots who need to get initiated into social emotional skills? So yeah, so till about grade 6 have schools. But after that, as they grow bigger, I don't think they really want to go to schools and sit there and learn and listen to the teachers anymore. This is what I feel. And therefore, I think, in my eyes, school should now be really working on those 7 soft skills. Your problem solving, your critical thinking, your communication, your ability to adapt, your management of time, interpersonal skills, and leadership. Now, let the rest be taken care of by AI, technology, etc. It's happening anyways. We are not going to be able to avoid it. Tomorrow, if an accountant says, look, I'm an accountant, I have a great degree in accounting, fact is that the accountant's his job is going to be done by computers. A person who knows manufacturing and knows all the 5 big processes of manufacturing, let me tell you, the robot is going to be doing it. He has to know how to manage the robot. And that is the upskilling and the entire change that is really happening in my eyes. And therefore, in academia, all your teachers are looking very, very stressed out. What will happen to you all? I think teachers are going to get more empowered in this new era. The teachers, in my eyes, need to become gurus all over again. And gurus are really not sage on the stage. They are more the guide on the side. Their job is to dispel darkness. Their job is to not give answers. Their job is to ask questions. The job is to keep telling the children that, challenge the children to be ready for more as they go on to the big wide world. So I think, in my eyes, the school should be really a hub of intellectual interaction between children and teachers. And the whole way of learning, I think, should go, and the bigger emphasis should be more on areas like the soft skills that I just mentioned. And let's face it, we have entered into an era of plentifulness. I mean, gone are the days where we say that, Indian people are hungry, they don't have roti, they don't have kapda, they don't have makan. It's all changing. Now, in fact, the people are being asked, do you have Jan, Aadhaar, and mobile? So JAM, Trinity is now the nature of what's happening today. So tomorrow's people, the children, are going to be really those who will have roti, kapda, makan, Aadhaar, mobile, and a bank account. To address them, should we do the same thing that we were doing yesterday? Think about it. Every day, we have about an average birth rate of about 65,000 new births happening, and an average death of about 27,000, which means net, before the end of today, before this conference is over, we'll have 40,000 new human births in this country. And 20 years later, they're going to be looking at all of us, whoever is alive. We'll all be in our 70s and 60s and 70s, at least I will be. They're going to look at us and say, hey, have you done whatever you had to do 20 years back to take care of me for today? Think about it. I think that's what we need to be looking at, and we might need a big disruption in education. Thank you so much.